The last couple of weeks have been a little abstract, a little vague, a little philosophical, since I tend to drift in that direction. But today is all about details, and I'm going to give 7 examples of phrases professional writers do not use. And these phrases aren't about grammar or language faux pas. They are about phrases that writers who run their own business should not use when they interact with clients. And they're very innocent phrases, but as you develop your business, as you get serious about your business, you realize your relationships with your clients are very delicate. And anything that you can do to optimize those interactions are just going to help you feel better about your business, feel more professional, feel more confident about how you run your business. So these are 7 phrases that I've found that we can easily slip into in our communication if we're not being mindful of the words that we choose. So I'm just going to get into it with the first one, the first innocent sounding one, and I'm going to put all of the phrases here too. So the first one is, sure, I can do that. Like I said, sounds very innocent. But where the slippery slope happens here is when you get, let's just say, an email from someone asking you, for, hey, I see that you offer writing services. Can you do this? Or I see that you offer editing services. Like, this is what I need. Your first instinct to respond with, sure, I can do that, it comes from your enthusiasm, comes from the excitement of an inquiry from a potential client. But where I find the danger here is that when someone says, sure, I can do that, without discussing the full scope of the project. For example, saying, sure, I can do that before you find out if this person even has a budget for your project. So that's exactly what I mean. It's sort of like getting ahead of yourself and saying, yeah, I can do that, without finding out about the details first. So don't rush to saying you can do something until you have, gone systematically through, what your ideal client is supposed to have. Obviously they have to have a budget to pay you. If they don't have that, you can't do that. So don't say, sure, I can do that. So that is the first one. The second one is closely related. It's when you ask a potential client who's inquiring about your services, what do you need? This just opens a really big can of worms for a lot of, it's not wrong to work to customize your projects. Obviously every project is custom to what the client needs, what you offer. So like that is all standard. It's when you're asking a client who oftentimes does not even know what they need. They might not know they just need rewriting services. They might not know that they need something completely written from scratch. You think that they would know, but oftentimes, you could really help someone and they're emailing you or calling you because they need your help, but just having such a general conversation about what you need is oftentimes just going to be a lot of unnecessary back and forth. Like, don't get me wrong, a good brainstorming can definitely come from a what do you need brainstorming session, and you can narrow it down. But if you want to be managing a lot of different clients over time, sometimes you just don't have time for that in the beginning, and especially again, if they haven't paid you that yet, going back to, the first question of like, find out if this person is actually a match for your services before you start having these big general conversations. So instead of asking them, what do you need? You can just get really specific about what you offer from their inquiry and say, hey, this is what I offer. This is what I charge. If this sounds good, we can continue further. But don't get into the weeds until you know that this person is actually a match for your services. Number 3 is when you've established a relationship with this client and you say to them, I'll get the draft to you soon. And soon is way too vague for my editor brain. I completely work on deadlines and working back from deadlines. And it's just, even if, it sounds casual, again, it's really, all of these are in the same ballpark as the sure, I can do that. Like, you want to just sound, casual. You want to have interactions that are, not so strict and just sort of stiff sounding. But this is a professional relationship. This is not a friendship, which I will get to in a little bit. And so if your client doesn't give you a deadline, you give them an exact time that you are going to get them the project. It makes it easier on them. They know when to expect it. You know when to meet that deadline. It's not going to slip your mind. You're not going to be hopefully working on it last minute because you know that deadline is coming up. So always set a deadline. Don't say vague things like soon or tomorrow. I would even say the time. I've done that a lot with freelance work that I used to do over the years. I would say, I'm getting this to you on Thursday of this date by 12 noon. It really doesn't hurt to be that specific. It really helps keep everyone on the same page. And again, don't worry about sounding too rigid because this is a professional relationship. Rigid is appropriate. So the next one is, when can you make the payment? Which I'm sure by now you understand why I do not like that phrase, why I do not think you should ever say that to a client. And that is because you should have your own terms of service and payment policy that dictates when the client makes the payment. So maybe you get half up front and half when the project is complete. Maybe you get the whole thing up front. Maybe you agree upon sending them an invoice when the project is complete and it says due upon receipt. But all of those options, no matter which one you choose, and they can vary depending on the client. It doesn't have to be the same every single time. You can be flexible that way as a service provider, but you never just, leave it open-ended and let the client make that call, because it is your business. Like, when you go into Starbucks and order a coffee, they don't say, so when can you pay for this? Are you thinking today, in the next 5 minutes? Like, it's understood that you order the drink and you pay them and then they make it for you and they give it to you. I think that's really helpful to keep in mind when you offer services, because so many times we get into this gray area and then we don't get paid. So be very clear about your terms of service and payment policy, and you tell the client when they pay you. The fifth one is, I'm free to answer any questions. Again, it sounds like you are a very thorough, friendly service provider, but you don't want to answer questions at the expense of your well-being. Going back to the Starbucks example, they have an hours of operation. They do their thing during those hours. When they're closed, you cannot get a coffee from Starbucks. So service providers always, who are conscientious, want to do a good job. And sometimes they make themselves too available and don't put up boundaries with clients. And so, I'm free to answer any questions. Sure. Do that. It's not alone. That is not something you don't want to say, like, no, I'm not going to answer your questions, but tell them when your hours of operations are, and let them know when you can't be reached, if it's not already obvious, because then they'll know not to expect a response until you open your business the next day. It's just setting clear expectations keeps everyone on the same page. So answer those questions, but do it during your business hours, and don't feel like you have to make yourself available 24 hours a day. Most businesses are not open 24 hours a day. And a lot of online service providers forget that and feel like they need to be. So I would say that's a quick way to burn out, and it can be easily avoided by just having your own business hours where you can answer questions. I'm just going to make another caveat about that, because I would still put even more boundaries on it because there could be a lot of back and forth, and that's coming up as well in an upcoming phrase that you shouldn't use. But, maybe only people can take advantage of asking you questions all throughout the day. So if you want to if you really want to put up your boundaries, maybe say you answer emails twice a day or once a day. And again, whatever you feel comfortable with, just clearly communicate that to the client so they can manage the expectations. If they know that they need to email you before noon because you check your emails at noon in your time zone, and after that you won't respond until the next day, then they can work within your parameters. You don't have to bend over backwards all the time. And again, it's a quick way to burn out if you don't set those limits with clients. So that leads into number 6, which is my clients are my friends. Now, definitely if you work with people closely over time, you could organically develop friendships with them. That just naturally happens. But if you go in from the get-go with this too friendly attitude, I usually actually say friendly, not friends, because you can be friendly, but being friends, again, puts you in this gray area where you're setting yourself up to have the client not look at you like a service provider. And it can lead to just some tricky things. Again, too casual communication that will lead to frustrations. Yeah, it might be fun to talk that casually at first, but the work could suffer. So let clients earn your friendship and trust. Don't go into your client relationships like they have already earned that. Let it organically develop over time. And it might not. You might never become, friends with clients. Obviously, it depends. But it's about going slowly and earning that friendship instead of having what I feel like is a too carefree attitude where you go in and say that all your clients are your friends. And number 7 is probably my favorite. And the phrase is, I'm not sure, let me get back to you. This one really helps me. I talk about efficient communication a lot, and I don't think I always explain it that clearly. It's hard to explain what I mean by efficient communication. Clear, straightforward, efficient communication. It is a hard thing to actually spell out, but this one is a really good example of extra emails you don't need because you feel like you're being polite or you feel like you're responding to a friend, but it's actually just creating, I would say, 2 extra emails that do not need to be sent, or 2 extra text messages, or 2 extra phone calls. Let me explain why. If you don't know the answer to something that someone sends you, and you spend energy creating a message that says, I'm not sure, let me get back to you, that is 1 extra message that someone else will probably respond to and say, sure, thanks, or yeah, let me know. Those are 2 messages that do not need to be sent. They're 2 messages that you put your energy into and time into, even if it takes less than a minute for each of those. I'm so careful about how you spend your time, and down to the second, down to the minute, and making things more efficient. So what do you do instead? If you get an email and it has a question that you don't know the answer to, just wait. They don't need to know right away that you don't know the answer and you're going to get back to them. I know it's like this polite instinct to just tell them that you got their message, but they've already moved on with their day when they've sent that question. Don't give yourself so much credit that they're just waiting. And if they are waiting, that's their issue to deal with. But in the long term, you're going to be viewed as a much more clear, efficient communicator if you just wait and the only response that you send is when you do know the answer. It's just these micro moments. I've been really into these micro decisions and micro moments lately that end up building something that's so much stronger. It's in the micro choices that we make that lead to the really strong relationships. That it's your micro choices in your writing and your editing that lead to you really feeling confident about your writing abilities. So those are the 7 phrases professional writers do not use, because there is a better way to communicate each of those. And ultimately, this is how serious writers treat their businesses. All right, we got through it. If you are not already subscribed to the Revision Fairy channel, I post videos every Wednesday. So you can click the red subscribe button below the video and tap the notification bell so that you get a little note when I've published a new video for you. If you found these phrases helpful, give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you next week.